the most effective control doesn't feel like control at all. Democratic systems have perfected something authoritarian regimes could never achieve: mass participation in our own subjugation, while feeling empowered by the process. Consider how this works psychologically. Traditional dictatorships create resistance through obvious oppression. People know they're being controlled and develop underground networks, secret codes, revolutionary movements. But democratic systems channel dissent into sanctioned outlets, elections, protests, petitions that provide psychological relief without threatening real power structures. This is the psychological genius of what political scientist Stephen Levitsky calls competitive authoritarianism. You feel like you're fighting the system when you vote against incumbents, but you're actually legitimizing the very framework that constrains your choices. Plato's most prescient insight was understanding how democratic freedom creates its own destruction. In the Republic, he mapped out a precise sequence. Democracy generates cognitive overload, which creates demand for simplification, which empowers demagogues, which leads to tyranny disguised as popular will.
They're assuming they know you by 4 little words, you know?
Yeah, and the emotion is driving this on both sides.
Yeah.
And that is the truth. And because it's just demonstrably true, you can show both sides adding to the division. And this headline on NDTV World, after Charlie Kirk's killing, growing chorus of conservatives want his critics ostracized. And it's true, they've taken him and elevated him to this position of a sacred image or symbol of something. You're not allowed to criticize it.
Right.
Before, either now or even before.
September 2025. Now, I'm not going to be doing videos about this particular topic, the topic being the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But in my video that I did before on this topic, I did mention how there would be copycats. And that's really going to be the focus of this video and segue into other subtopics. But before I get into this topic, I did mention in that video how historically I would talk about online celebrities, also known today as influencers, and their quick rise to fame and perhaps even fortune. And this individual would be, or would have been, one of the people that I casually highlighted. Now, I'm not trying to take away from his being taken from life. That's a tragedy, and whatever his family is going through and his friends. But I just wanted to highlight how these types of people rise quickly because they are, as a descriptive, sanctioned by those, for example, who are controlling this game board that we're living in. I've referred to them as those with generational commitment and a monopoly on violence. And we see today, for example, how the whole world is paying tribute to this one individual who really only debated people in public for years. And I'm not stating or implying it was a bad thing. Whatever position you're on, whether you agree with what he was saying or not, doesn't matter, but that's really what he did. But the fact that the whole world is talking about this and gathering in massive numbers has to make you think what's behind it all. Now, people through their programming would justify it by saying, well, it was an attack on what people say democracy, but people don't realize, and I've emphasized this over many years, over a decade, people have democracy. This is democracy, and this is where democracy leads to. For example, where 51% of the population can take away the rights of 49%, people have no idea what they're ranting and raving about when it comes to that, but I digress. But really, I guess a branch of that would be freedom of speech, free speech. And this was an attack on that. This is a part of the whole programming that's in play here. But the whole world, and not only that, but people are donating massive amount of money to the family, where I think the last count was pushing $5 million and rising. Now, this individual, Charlie Kirk, his net worth, they're saying, was about almost $20 million. He was a multi-millionaire, and his organization, The Turning Point, was raking in almost $100 million annually. So he has money, and people, my point here is, again, how people are donating money to people who don't need it. And I've highlighted over the years, for example, there are countless of people you've never heard of who literally sacrificed everything for truth, justice, and freedom. But no one really cares about, because these people have not been sanctioned, not promoted, and don't have the behind the closed doors backing as these other, we call them influencers now. And that's why no one really cares. I'm not taking away from the fact that someone was taken from life. Moreover, the impact this has on his family, specifically his children, growing up without a father. And there's a lot of controversy and talk about who did it, who actually did it, because we have apparently, allegedly, a self-admitting person who said that they did it. But there's so much controversy about this, and I highlighted, for example, in my previous video on this topic, how there are people celebrating publicly. Now, a lot of these people are losing their jobs, apparently, but just the fact that people are doing this, and there's tens of thousands of people going online celebrating the assassination of someone, taking someone from life. And this is where we've digressed to in society, where people can do that. Now, these people are saying, oh, that's my freedom of speech. Well, no. So there's lines that need to be drawn, but that's a different tangent. But I did say there would be copycats, just like with the fake heroes of the so-called convoy of freedom. And not within a day or two, we have copycats. And there's one individual who dressed in the same t-shirt, perhaps in the same clothing, as the person who they have in custody who allegedly committed the act, desecrating a memorial site, or one of the memorial sites for Charlie Kirk, dressed in the same t-shirt at least, which is a form of being a copycat. And we're going to see more of this. Now, here's my point to everything here. People, especially through social media, go into these echo chambers, and they keep hearing, for for example, negativity. And they're feeding this negativity. And even in people's personal lives, you can see this happening, where things get blown out of proportion in their own minds and go off on these dark tangents and convince themselves of things that perhaps are not even true. We see, I've highlighted extensively, the studies made famous by Julia Shaw implanting false memories, and people can implant their own false memories, and they start to believe is to make an uninformed conclusion, what they're hearing constantly. And when you press them for this type of stuff, they don't understand, or they can't justify anything that they're reiterating from what they hear. And this is one of the things that Charlie Kirk was doing when he was debating people, was challenging them, taking them deeper into what these people think is the truth. And this upset many, many people. And through this, he made many enemies on pretty much every topic. But we have this controversy with who actually did it, because he was also upsetting people, very powerful people in the world, specifically a group. And this is where all that controversy is coming from. But the commoner, the weak-minded commoner, who buys into the negativity being spoken about him for many years, and we see this as well with President Trump, it manifests, it grows. That darkness starts to consume them. And through this, they think whatever, they're doing the right thing, like this one copycat, and it just gets out of hand. What you could take away from all this is be very mindful what subculture or what group that you associate with in these echo chambers, because they will control your mind, because these echo chambers become hive minds. And everything we see in this world today, everywhere around the world, across the world, is just becoming insanity. And I've talked about in previous videos and upcoming videos how the psychosis, as a descriptive, the mental health issues are not only on one side, but on both sides. And this is very dangerous. This is where we see civilization fall apart instantly. Just be mindful of that. Be mindful of what you listen to and what you say. And I've said in previous videos, words have meaning, words have power. Thoughts are just thoughts. They're contained. But as soon as you voice that thought, it has power. And that power spreads. You can say negative things about individuals or groups, or you can say positive things. I remember, I'm going to end off with this. When you're young as a little kid, at least when I was young, old school, if you can't say something nice about someone, then don't say anything. But we don't see that anymore. Perhaps we should revisit this. This not only applies to individuals, but groups as well. And that's all I want to say about this. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
But sometimes crazy isn't just a figure of speech. Sometimes it's a diagnosis. And as long as there have been those willing to diagnose others as insane, there have been those who have sought to use this as a label for their political enemies. And why not? Once diagnosed as mentally unsound, political dissidents could be treated as we have always treated those we dismiss as crazy. They could be locked away, drugged, and subjected to all manner of torture in the name of treatment. Now, the idea that would-be rulers would cynically use the lunatic cudgel against their political enemies is bad enough. But what if the reality is the complete opposite of what is commonly understood? What if the delusions of the dissidents are in fact real? What if their paranoid fantasies are not fantasies at all? What if their inability to fit in is not a sign that they are sick, but the society they are protesting against is sick? In other words, what if it's not the political dissidents who are crazy, but the politicians? You're about to learn about the dark history and the even more disturbing present of political psychopathy. Prepare yourself for descent into madness.
The cult surrounding Leach and Barber follow that exact narrative that he said. It is a cult. I don't doubt it. It's a cult. No, he's absolutely right. I mean, I'm listening to it. I'm like, holy cow. It's right there. He points it right out, and people have no clue they're being used.
That's right.
Kind of glad that the Chris and Tamara cult got my Facebook, extinguished. Starting to see patterns. We learned patterns in public school, right? We learned how to address and see patterns. And now when I see things like the ostrich farm, I'm like, there's a pattern. There's a pattern over here. There's a pattern over here.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.